so let me see here. So human and dog reactive, right?
Yes.
He's a good looking little guy.
He's a cutie.
And he's got a couple of bite attempts, is that correct?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, successful bite attempts.
Okay, so, all right. So what we can do here is let's go ahead and move that left chair to the left a little bit. Have a seat there, sir. Sir, what was your name?
Marissa and I.
Mike.
Marissa Mike. All right, cool. And then we have here
This is
Mambo.
Mambo.
Mambo, 3M. All right, so I'm gonna test real quick. Is just his touch sensitivity here. Go ahead and pull him in a little bit closer to you. Yep, a little bit more. Okay. So when have you seen these bite attempts or these bites?
It's usually like first engagement. So if a stranger walked in here right now and it was just us two, he would get very revved.
Okay.
And if I went to like pick him up, like he'll take it out on anything close to him. Inanimate objects, his owners.
Yeah, and he's
whoever.
bitten me several times. He loves me and he'll bite me.
So when
if
he
I
gets
do
fired
that.
up, like he's just, he loses his mind.
Sure.
He's actually, this is way good for him right now. Like it's, our neighbors are a major problem. He really freaks when our neighbors come outside.
Okay.
And if somebody tries to come in our house.
Mm-hmm.
Like the door, anybody coming to the door, like a delivery person, I've like picked him up before to grab food from a delivery person, and he's hauled off on me and like bit my hand.
Sure. Did he puncture or break or?
Yeah.
Okay. How long is this going on for?
About a year now.
He's had another trainer.
Yeah.
The problem that we're having is we can't break through that.
Craziness.
Yeah, I mean like he's just like you could have a whole steak in your hand and he doesn't care.
Sure. So it was positive reinforcement, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How long or how many sessions did you do?
We probably did like 5 sessions or so.
Okay. All targeting his reactivity?
That was why we initially called her, but she really said it's about underlying obedience first, so that's mostly what we worked on.
Okay. And then did she happen to try to touch on the behavior stuff?
I mean, yeah, like she gave us tools. So she said basically like if we do have somebody coming to the house, we should put him on a leash like this and slowly like let the person sit in our living room like in a seat and throw treats out and then like let him slowly like get the treats and slow introduction, which actually works okay. But what I noticed, and this happened to us recently, is that
Yeah, looking forward to.
he could be okay then in the house with people. You can tell he's on edge, but he'll be okay. But then when they go to leave, he freaks.
Yeah. So like, let's say I'm in your place, we're having a conversation, and he's settled, and I jump up and clap my hands. Does he trigger to that?
Probably. I mean,
If you're new,
probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if it's just us, no, but.
Sure. Will he take the food if people call him food?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody that he has opened up to that he like accepts as part of like you're cool to come into the house or?
Our family
Like
that
my
he's known
parents.
since a puppy, yeah. Anyone he knew when he was, before this actually started, which was mostly our family, like he's fine with them.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's the people that are new since then.
Yeah. How old is this guy?
He'll be 3 in June.
Okay. And you said that this stuff started coming out about a year ago?
Yeah.
Okay. And then before then?
Before then, probably the biggest thing we noticed is that he would get really like anxious when we would take him for a walk. Like once we started getting out this equipment, he would sometimes run or sometimes feel like, but it seemed like he kind of also wanted to go, but then he would kind of like lay down and refuse to go. So I think walks have always scared him. We stopped walking him actually.
Because of the reactivity?
Yeah, because then he started getting reactive, right? Like at first it was, just kind of like panting and stuff, and then he started actually like lunging at people that we would walk by.
Yeah. And you've had him since when?
Puppy.
Yeah, like
2 months?
8 weeks or so.
Yeah, 2 months. Woman?
Yeah.
Oh, back.
Oh, sorry.
Right there. So what's happening here is you have a nervous dog, and he's very insecure. Okay. So the reason I'm having you bring him in here is because he's under stress clearly, and he's wanting to use that as like a source of security blanket. But there's one thing, there's being secure, or feeling secure, and needing a security blanket. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's two different things here. And we want them to feel secure and not so much need the security blanket, okay? So here, the stuff with people coming into the home, normal. What's happening here is this guy is going under stress and his nervousness is kicking in and he's unable to settle, okay? So like with the food stuff, because he's not what I would call, he's not an aggressive dog, okay? He is a dog that when he's overwhelmed, when all that redirect stuff they're talking about is normal. So dogs, when they get really frustrated, they release emotions, if you will, through their mouths. Licking, chewing, panting, biting, nipping, salivating. They're very mouth-based, okay? So if he's like overwhelmed with stress and you pick him up and you pull him away from the stressor, he's kind of like it's gotta go somewhere and you're the closest thing, okay? Which for small dogs, it's pretty common because he is so small that you could just scoop him up. And that's why that's happening, okay? It's not because he's actively being aggressive to you, he's just super frustrated. When it comes to people entering the home, he's technically just doing his job. You know, because dogs, like, you know, at like, you know, 6 o'clock, your cousin's coming over, and maybe he's never met the cousin, and you're aware of this, but he's not. So when the knock happens and he triggers and he starts barking, he's just being territorial, right? But because he's a nervous dog, he's like most dogs, when the door opens, because they'll bark to let people know, like, hey, someone's here, but then when the door opens, they're like, oh, it's just a person, and I love people, right? They don't have any suspicion. But when you get a nervous guy, when he goes into territorial mode, and the nervousness kicks in, they have a hard time settling. That's why I asked if I were to just jump up and clap, would he bark? Because that's a nervous response. So fear, anxiety, and nervousness are very similar. But fear will not shut up. Fear will stand back and keep barking at you, and then when you move away, they'll come in and bark some more, and then when you move in, they'll back off, but they'll keep barking. Like, they don't let it go. You can put them in a different room, and like, they won't let it go. Anxious dogs need to move a lot. You'll see them panting, and like, so there's a little bit of anxiety from whenever they're in their form, but they can't settle. They keep wanting to move and walk around, and they'll lay down, and they'll get up, and they'll walk around, they'll lay down, they'll get up and walk around. And nervousness will settle, but then if something changes suddenly within the environment from the suspicion or the suspicious person, it triggers, okay? And then they start barking again, and once everything settles, they'll calm down, and then if another thing were to happen, they trigger and they start barking again. The stuff along the fence, normal. I'm not saying that you can't disagree with it, you can't correct it. I'm just saying all this stuff is actually just typical dog behavior, okay?
Yeah.
So one of our, like,
And I guess I fully expect that. It's more of like that breaking through those moments
Yeah.
to like get his attention, to be like, listen, you can cool it out now, like instead of it just going on and on and on.
Correct.
yes, he will go on and on with the neighbors until either he's dragged forcibly away from it or they go away. But the two neighbors on either side, you know, our houses are like so close, you can like touch them.
Mhm.
So they're really close. So anytime the neighbors come out on either side, we have a fence, but you can see them. Like, he'll just go just crazy. And now they have two dogs next door.
Yeah.
And they lunge and bite at each other like into the fence.
Yeah.
And it's like taking chunks out of the wood even.
Yeah. So it's typical dog behavior. We can correct it and we can stop it, but I don't hold that against them. Okay, so when I come into these consultations, I'm getting this information because I'm trying to determine, is this an aggressive dog? Is this a dog that's under a lot of stress? Is this fearful, nervous, blah, blah, blah kind of dog? And then that helps me kind of determine how we're going to address the issue.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought this. Okay, because he was barking in there because he was contained, right? He's trapped, and then he's like, who is this guy in here? You pulled him out, and then like he chilled. So I came into his personal space. A little bit of curiosity there. But when I came into his personal space, and he didn't care. He moved back, if anything, right? So if he was like really aggressive, he would have bit this, because he's saying, hey, back away, I want nothing to do with you. You know, but he didn't do that. He's been whining, of course, because he's in an unknown environment, which again, it's not uncommon. But the main thing here is he's seeking comfort, and a couple of times you guys have actually given it to him. but it doesn't help him. It actually makes it worse.
So like that, like with my
Yep.
steering, okay.
Because your intention is to console him. But he doesn't need you to console him. He needs direction. Okay? So let me try. When you're trying to work with him, did she handle him?
Yeah, he was really good for her. You could tell she was good with dogs. I think we had a hard time like learning from her and being able to do the exercises and stuff. I think it was more honestly like that, like the way she was teaching was hard for us to do, but she and him
Very
had
specific.
it was very like regimented and specific, and it was just hard to follow, but her and him had a good relationship.
Okay, so what I'm gonna have you do is just loop this over the top of his head.
Okay.
And you're gonna go like this, and you're gonna just push this leather thing down to help keep it in its place.
To like his neck.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, bud.
Yeah, and you're gonna pull it up so that it's a little snug there. See how it's coming down the lowest harness on the front?
Do you want me to take the harness off?
No, you keep the harness on, just
Okay.
bring it up like that. There you go,
I
perfect.
see, okay.
Good, and then I'll take the back here.
Do you want me to unhook this one?
There you go, that one. Okay. So this you're not gonna do. Okay?
This is what he used to do when we would try to take him out for walks when he was younger.
Yeah. So we might get a little bit of what we call alligator rolling or anything like that. Maybe it gets too overwhelmed here. But what I'm gonna do is just kind of settle him so that he's not whining ideally the entire time.
Okay.
So the obedience stuff actually has nothing to do with the behaviors you're dealing with. Okay? So think of obedience as education and behavior as morality. Okay? Obedience would be sit, stay, come. Math, English, science. And behavior would be don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't jump, don't bark, don't bite. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yep.
So we can have someone who is a genius in physics or whatever and can be a terrible person. And someone who could be a very good person but not the smartest person, right? They don't correlate.
Right.
The same thing for dogs. So obedience has nothing to do with defense fighting, has nothing to do with the reactivity on the walks. Well, technically it doesn't, and I'll explain more about that. And especially the coming into the home type stuff, that's also not obedience related, that's all behavior stuff, okay? Now having obedience does play a factor, but it's how you do the obedience, okay? So you did positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is great for stuff you want to see again, but not so great for stuff you don't want to see again, okay? So for instance, when they were feeding him the food, they're trying to build trust and a positive association. But if he's a nervous dog, sure, he'll like him, he's like, oh, you give me stuff, but then as soon as they move, because there's still distrust, he's gonna trigger, because he's nervous. In order to help these sudden triggers, he needs to learn how to handle the nervousness in response to sudden movements, okay?
Mhm.
So, and I'll explain how all this stuff works. So I'm assuming you did research on me before reaching out, so you know we use remote and prong collar,
Yep.
okay? Which for dogs like him, is perfectly safe to use. I have an 8-pound Chihuahua and he's trained on e-collar.
Okay.
He's fully off leash trained. So, first thing we do with the case like this, okay, is we work on the heel. A heel is walking on the leash. That's gonna resolve the reactivity issue, or that's gonna be the foundation for resolving the reactivity issue, okay? Because the harness creates opposition reflex or resistance, which then leads to frustration, okay? So it's very common, especially with small guys, that people put their dogs on harnesses because they don't want them putting pressure on the neck because of the trachea, right? But what happens is when dogs feel pressure against the chest, it creates resistance and they end up pulling against the pressure. So that's what opposition reflex is. It's if you pull, they pull against it. So if you pull back, he pulls forward. You pull left, he pulls right. You pull right, he pulls left. He's going opposite to you. And that opposite and that tension in his body is what's creating the frustration. Okay, so a lot of people when they get their puppies put them on harnesses because they don't want the puppies have no training, right? So they don't want the puppy to choke. So what happens is puppies on harness, they're puppies and they're friendly with everybody, and then they see a dog, the person pulls them back because they don't want them to pull towards the dog and annoy the dog. And this happens over the course of a year or whatever. And over the course of that year, happy-go-lucky puppy who wants to meet everybody becomes frustrated puppy because they can't meet anybody and they're constantly feeling pressure, becomes agitated dog, becomes aggressive dog over the course of time. Okay, we actually do this in protection training. So if you ever watch a dog being protection trained, you're gonna see them on a harness. Okay, because we're utilizing that opposition reflex to create frustration. So we have the person holding the dog, then we have the person agitating the dog. So the person that's agitating is creating suspicion, is pissing the dog off, and making the dog lunge and bark, and the person here is pulling the dog back to intensify the behavior. And then we're petting them and smacking them good, because we want them to keep doing that until we can build it to the point of the dog actually biting the agitator, and then we shape it and mold it into a protection dog. So people are kind of unknowingly making protection dogs because of the harness, because they're constantly pulling away from everything, so they're constantly creating frustration towards things, and eventually it becomes uncontrolled because there is no discipline, and now the dog's reactive to everything. Okay, in your case, you have the harness paired with a nervous dog. So he already goes outside in some degree stressed, right? And then you add in a stimuli like a person or a dog or whatever, and then he's just over threshold. And then you get the reactivity stuff. And because he's so frustrated, if they get close enough, frustration has to go somewhere, that's where we get the bites.
Yeah, and actually, because up until recently, we have a fenced-in backyard. We just let him out there by himself to go potty and everything. He likes it out there. If the neighbors come, he doesn't like that. Then he gets mad and runs the fence and everything. It wasn't until these two dogs got introduced, like a month ago, that we've had to now take him out on a leash because we can't let him obviously attack the fence. And he hates it. Like, he hates the leash. He doesn't want to go out there. He's agitated now. And he used to love being out there when he was just free to be himself out there. So that kind of makes sense.
Now there's more stressors. Yeah.
And he's on the leash now, which he wasn't before.
Correct. So all that stuff can be addressed. Okay, so that's where aversives come into play. So positive reinforcement, great for stuff you want to see again, not good for stuff you want to stop. That's where aversives play a part. So aversives are meant to stop things. Okay, you ever touch a hot stove? You touch it again?
No.
At least not on purpose, right? That was an aversive, but it was an inanimate object, right? So here, what is a dog aversive?
Say that again?
What's an aversive to a dog?
Everything to him.
So you're thinking in terms of this, but for him, if you were to apply an aversive, what would it be?
Oh, to tug on him, pull him back.
Oh.
He's doing it though. What would he do as an aversive to another dog or to you?
Bark.
What else? Lunge, what else?
Bite.
Yes, the bite. So aversives here with dogs are physical. Okay, they time out doesn't help anything. Dogs they're not introspective. He's not going to reflect and go like, oh man, I shouldn't have barked at the neighbor's dog or anything like that. It's human. Dogs don't give each other treats. Dogs don't give each other CBD. They don't pick each other up, right? They don't really console. Dogs are simply correcting things they don't want, okay? So if he doesn't want the neighbor's dogs, along the fence, he's going to run and bark and chomp at the fence, trying to back that dog away. Get away from my fence, okay? If you walk too close, if someone walks too close to you when you're outside, hey, you're too close, back off.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's using physicality. When you pick him up, either frustration built up from the situation, or hey, don't pick me up, I need to handle this. Because somebody has to handle this.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Because to you, you're just like, dude, this is just a person walking on the sidewalk, but not to him.
Right.
Okay, he doesn't understand that you're not doing anything because there's nothing to do. He's just like, I'm under stress, so I'm thinking you're under stress, so I'm gonna just be proactive and lunge and bark and snap at people to keep them at bay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's all fueled through nervousness. Okay? So
I'm curious about that, because I bought him the e-collar, never used it in like a shock mode, but like vibrate, and it was working okay, and the trainer was like, no, never do that, like positive reinforcement only.
yeah.
And her argument against the negative reinforcement was that creates an association of like, these dogs are bad and I hate these dogs next door, and I get zapped when they're there.
No.
Okay.
In order to make something a negative, and that's super common thought process. For instance, if a dog jumps on somebody, you can correct them with the e-collar. But people would think, but isn't that going to make the dog not like the person? I don't know. Because it's a split second in time that happened when the dog actively jumped on the person, and then when the dog's sitting down or standing and not misbehaving, nothing happens. So it's momentary. In order to make those dogs a negative, anytime Mambo here would have been next to those dogs, you would have to remote him, and then he'd have to get away from them, and then the negative would turn off. So he thinks, man, every time I'm next to them, the negative turns on, and when I'm away from him, the negative turns off.
So it's almost like the opposite.
Right, but it doesn't, but dogs also don't really think that way. He would just think like, you know what? I don't want to get near those dogs because when I do, something goes off. It wouldn't make him not like the dogs. He already doesn't like them.
Right.
You know? Because if it was a dog that he had no conflict with, they would just be along the fence sniffing each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's kind of like if you have neighbors you don't like, there's going to be tension there. Right? But as humans, we're civilized. We don't run on the fence and yell at each other, right?
Yeah.
But he's primal. So it's to make something a complete negative, like it requires a ton more work. Like to make, let's say, kennel is a good example. If a dog is barking in the kennel, you can correct them, right? But people think, isn't that going to make the kennel negative? I don't know. If I put the dog in the kennel and I remote them the entire time they're in the kennel until they escape the kennel or until I release them from the kennel and pressure doesn't turn off, that makes the kennel negative. Because he's like, every time I'm in here, something bad happens. But when I get out of here, bad goes away. That's how we teach dogs not to go into certain rooms. So if we have a client that like, we want this dog to go in our baby's room, take the dog, put him on a leash, walk him in the baby's room, start remoting, dog runs out, bring him back in, repeat, and eventually the dog goes, holy hell, I'm not going into that room. Okay? But again, it doesn't make the dog not like the room. The dog just goes, when I go in that room, something bad happens, so I'm not going to go in there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, positive reinforcement, it doesn't work. I don't
I personally agree. It's just, because I was like,
No.
I don't know how you get through to somebody who thinks primally.
Yeah.
Like, that I'm actually rewarding you for not barking now, right after you were just barking.
Yeah, and that's too complex
Yeah.
for a dog to process. It's too complex.
And you have to be so immediate with it,
Yeah.
like
So,
right after they stop barking, to reward them to stop.
correct. Timing isn't that critical when it comes to how I approach this. Definitely, you want to correct something sooner rather than later, but you can come in and correct at any point. If someone is robbing the bank and they're 10 minutes into robbing the bank, you think the cops go like, oh shit, 30 minutes into it.
Right.
Guess we can't do anything.
Right.
No, you go and you arrest them, right? So, as long as you correct them in the act, he will relate it to the act, okay? And it gets more nuanced, I'm not gonna worry about that right now. But I've corrected dogs as long as 15 minutes after doing something, and it still ties to the behavior. It just has to be done a specific way, and it's very easy to understand. So here, the way I would approach this, and you can see like how he's shaking and stuff, the whining, and I'm actually applying immersive here. I'm giving him a couple of pops every time I hear him kind of give the whining here. And you can see how much he's shaking and like how he's the lip licking and everything, because the stress levels are up, right? But here he's more contained. I'm not having to hold him back because I'm not dealing with that harness creating that opposition reflex, okay? Clearly there's some attachment stuff here because he's staring straight at you, right? But here when I apply a correction, I'm wanting him to keep in the space. I don't want to contain him, right? So this is all mental game, not physical. We tend to control physically. Pick the dog up, hold the dog back. That creates more frustration. What I do is apply a correction. And corrections or punishers, however you want to look at them, don't have to be harsh. But people's brains always go there. They always think like, oh man, you're just torturing the dog. I'm like, no, dogs bite each other. Like that's their consequence. Like anything I do is never going to match a dog bite. Because one, go to jail. Two, I wouldn't be here, right? And three, as humans, we've developed tools and technologies that help us correct dogs effectively without causing punctures. Okay, so like even prong collars, have you seen like the spiky ones? Like the bigger dogs have them, and people look at them and be like, oh my god, like that must hurt the dog, but they're not sharp pointed, because if they were, it would be puncturing dogs' necks all over the place.
Right.
They're rounded tips, but they're designed to mimic the dog bite. You know, with e-collar, it's just a muscle contraction. So, and you said, I'm sorry, what function did you use?
I was just using the vibrate.
The vibrate.
Like it has sound, vibrate, and shock.
Correct. So we use the stim, or as you would call it, the shock function. Okay. So, do you remember how much you paid for that collar? 35, 60 bucks.
Something like that.
Yeah. So that's more of what we would call a shock collar. What we use are e-collars. Okay. The difference is shock collars, the way the stim is delivered is different than a e-collar. Okay. An e-collar.
You're gonna get bit.
Yeah.
He's actually being way better
Yeah.
than he would.
But you see how you can't like let disengage from you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So e-collars are actually miniaturized TENS units. Okay, they use the technology on humans. They use it at a chiropractic or physical therapist office. If you ever seen those machines or the commercials where it's like work out your abs as you watch TV, that's a TENS unit. It's a muscle stimulator. Okay, so but people think it's electricity running through the dog's body because again, of how people think. So the professional level collars don't so the one that you have, I felt them before.
Yeah, I put it on my neck.
Did
I
not feel
tried
good.
it out.
Yeah. What number?
Low. It was like 3.
3? How was that?
It hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I wouldn't say it hurt. It was uncomfortable.
Sure. So ours, man, you probably wouldn't even feel it until 15, 20-ish is usually the range when people start to feel it. Dogs can be a little bit more sensitive, just depends on the dog. But ours has 127 levels, so we can really fine tune it to the dog. Do you remember how many yours had?
I think it was 100.
It was 100, yeah. So 3 out of 100, you really shouldn't be feeling anything. But I know what you're talking about because I felt one and I felt 4 out of 100 on my hand. And my hand like literally bumped. And for like 15 minutes my hand felt like it was weird. Did you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, it definitely, it was more, when I did it on my hand, I could like barely feel it. When I stuck it on my neck,
it was more sensitive?
Yeah.
Sure. So with ours, it's really refined. You're not going to really feel much of anything. Okay. And then when you do feel it, it's going to be like a light contraction, and as you go higher, it becomes more uncomfortable for sure. So here, first thing I do with a case like this is cover the heel. So earlier I said obedience and behavior don't really correlate, but it's not the heel that's helping Mambo here. It's the discipline behind it. It's the physicality that he's going to get through the remote collar. Okay, that's what's going to help him. So the e-collar is like a means of like a bite on a button, if you will. It's like how I kind of term it to people. So, but he has to have a foundation, so it's not like walk out and then let your dog be terrible and punish him for all the bad things. He has to have a reference point, and that's where teaching him how to walk on a leash helps that, okay? So instead of going, hey, every time he barks at someone, zap him, I would go, we're gonna do this first, and we're gonna see what does it fix, okay? Because a proper heel will fix like 60 to 70% of problems. Because what looks like a bunch of things is actually just a few things. But the owners see them separately, and I see them as clusters of behaviors that are all fueled by a certain thing, okay? So we see what that resolves in the first week. You come back, you're like, Jesse, you know, walking the leash is so much better. And human reactivity is typically the first thing that goes away, and then reactivity towards dogs. So I would expect something like that, where you'd be like, hey, almost all human reactivity is gone. It's really just certain dogs. And then I'll say like, well, what kind of dogs? And you might say, dogs that bark at him. And I go, yep, that makes sense because the dog's putting threat. But other dogs he'll walk past. And I go, yeah, great. So we know we fixed all this stuff. Now it's just this remaining stuff. We make a couple of adjustments. We work on the second part of heel. And then you come back to class 3. How are we doing? Even better. Are we struggling with anything? Well, we have the dog behind fences or dogs behind fences. And I go, okay, so this is what we're going to do. Because that's completely unrelated, right? If he's in the yard loose, and the dogs are out in the yard as well, that's completely unrelated to the heel. Heel is going to help resolve any issues on the walk and get, like, I think I heard like whimpering or something in his consultation, like if he's in new places or something, kind of like what we're seeing here.
Well, yeah, or if he's like in the house and he hears like car doors closing or, you know, the sounds of a neighborhood, like whenever we keep TVs and white noise and stuff on all the time because he just reacts to everything outside and it's barking.
nervous
It's
dog.
annoying. Yeah, so, but yeah, if he hears things outside, he knows now not to bark. He knows we don't like it when he barks. He still does sometimes, but he'll bark and then he'll kind of just whine and whimper because he still wants to,
Yeah.
you know.
So that may go away.
Okay.
The sensitivity towards outside sounds may go away with the heel. Okay. So even though they're not related, heel pacifies dogs. It calms them down. Okay, which is why almost always any trainer who knows what they're doing is gonna cover leash walking or the heel day one. Okay, because it fixes so many problems. The only time I don't do heel day one is one, like during the winter when we had those really bad snowstorms.
Yeah.
I had a couple of clients starting like, well, you're not gonna be outside, so we'll start with something inside. But typically we would do this, right? But that was because of weather. Or two, if I have a dog that is aggressive and does attack for the sake of attacking people or whatever, heel is not going to stop the aggression. We have to stop the aggression first, and then we kick in with the obedience and discipline. Okay? But almost like 95% of the time, we're going to start off with leash walking and see what does it fix. Okay? So then if the inside stuff, because since it's calming him down and he's no longer already on edge all the time, less sensitive to outdoor things. Okay? But if he's always at a 4, very easily jumps to 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever it is, because he's already at that level. But if he's at a 0 or 1, it takes more for him to escalate to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So here, we see what does that fix, and then behavioral stuff is pretty simple. When it comes to, like, so let's say stopping the fence fighting, because it's simply applying aversive for him to stop the behavior. Okay? So I was raised old school, I was spanked. And so if I talk back to my mom, which only happened once, by the way, so that kind of gives you a feel for how strict my mom was. But if, like, let's say I was like yelling in the yard at my neighbor, my mom just took me inside and put my ass. And she's like, don't do that again. I'm like, all right. That's the conversation, right? So similar is we can use the e-collar to correct them, to teach them, like, hey, fence fighting is not allowed. I don't care what you do in the yard, but you're definitely not going to fence fight. Okay? And it allows you to correct them without needing to have them on a leash. Okay? Now the issue we're going to have here, okay, is that he will most likely need the collar in order to keep him in check from fence fighting. Okay? And I'll explain how all that stuff works too. Because people tend to think you retrain dogs and then they become good dogs and they just choose to be good dogs. And that's not how it works. Okay? Dogs are good dogs because we're making them be good dogs. He has a learning capacity of a 3 to 4 year old child. Okay, do you ever expect like a 3 to 4 year old child to like become independent and like get a job and all that stuff? No, that's an adult, right? You have to tell a 3 to 4 year old child what to do. Don't write on the walls. Go put up your things. Go get dressed. Go eat dinner. Right? You have to tell them what to do because they're not at that level to think for themselves. He is forever a 3 to 4 year old child. Okay, so but more intelligent to a degree. So you guys drive, or you just got off the expressway, right?
Yeah.
Do you go, when you're on the expressway, do you go speed limit?
Not always, no.
Right. But if you see a squad car, what happens?
Okay, slow down.
Slow down. It's called opportunistic behavior. All animals do it. Okay? So, and we're humans. And we know better, right? We know, hey, the speed limit's 70, but I'm gonna go 80. Because there's no squad car. Right? Same thing for dogs. So think of that e-collar as a cop on the collar. When it's present, he's gonna behave himself. He's not gonna be reactive or whatever. But when he's off of it, he's gonna go, oh, I can be reactive, right? And he's going to start making those kinds of choices. So he's going by what's going on in the environment. So dogs are reactive. He's responding to things. He's going, hey, that collar is present, so I know to behave myself. Hey, that collar is not present, so I don't have to behave myself. Okay? So is he always going to have to wear it? No. But he will have it almost likely when you're going to need it. I personally wouldn't need a collar, but because I've been doing this for 10 years. I could take him off this leash and I bet you the reactivity will go away within a couple of minutes. Okay, but I know how to use this leash really well. And you're not dog trainers, right? You're coming in, you're like wanting a result, but something that you can replicate because previously whatever you're doing before was kind of difficult, right? Because of timing and all that stuff, or intensity. If he's too far gone, how are you gonna get through to him with food?
Right.
I mean, because the stress levels are up here, right? So it's kind of like being in a burning building and then wanting to grab a brownie. Like, that's the last thing on your mind. You're just like, I'm gonna get out of this building because you're stressed, right? Same for these guys. So here, If he's too stressed out, food doesn't matter anymore. Trying to console him doesn't matter. Trying to talk sense to him never matters because dogs don't understand words. It's all about consequence. So if he were performing that behavior and another dog disagreed with it, they would just bite him. That's the consequence. Don't bark at the fence. Boom. There we go. Simple conversation. Okay. So that's where these tools come into play. With people coming inside the home, that is a different context because you know at 5:30, hey, our cousin's coming over. He doesn't. He never will. To him, it's always a new threat. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
He's not gonna know what's behind the door. The thing is, other dogs, like I said earlier, if they love people, they'll alert bark, hey, somebody's here, what's going on? Who's gonna handle this? But as soon as the door opens and they see the person, like, oh, it's just a person, I don't know people, right? But for him, because he's nervous, when you open the door, he's already suspicious from territorial behavior, but also he's nervous, he's like, I don't know how to handle this. This is a potential threat. Best to be on the offensive, right? So to keep them at bay so that they don't hurt me or us. So then there has to be conversation where you tell them, like, hey, like, you don't, like, chill out. Like, you don't need to be suspicious or territorial, just relax, okay? So once we settle the nerves, more likely to see curiosity because he's no longer stuck in suspicion mode. But as long as he's stuck in suspicion mode, most likely not gonna, like for newer people, like he probably has his bubble of people that he's good with. Maybe before the problem started, is that?
Yeah, it seems like the people that he's good with are the people that he was fine with before he turned this way.
Yeah, that's super common because at 2 years old, something changed,
Mm-hmm.
and anybody before that were good. Anybody after that, no good.
Like
right?
even so, Mike's brother has a dog that he knew at that good phase of his life, and so they're friends. He loves Freddie the dog.
Uh-huh.
Toby came into the picture this year, and he didn't like Toby as much. Now he's getting used to him, and now they'll play. But I mean, so it took him a while. He did get there with him, but he was growling at him, snapping at him. He never bit him, pink X, he was a puppy, but he was just like, get out of here. Like, but he would want to go play with Freddie. So
yeah.
it's weird.
So it's super common. Like I get puppies or dogs at 6 months and a year is the most common. So 6 months and a year are the pivotal psychological shifts. And 2 years is actually technically another one, but it's less common to see behaviors trigger at that time.
Yeah.
6 months and a
It might
year.
have happened. It might have happened in like a year.
Yeah, it might have been. Like, it was somewhere between 1 and 2 years.
Sure, that all this started to happen?
Yeah.
And it's because he's coming into his own. So like a lot of people, their dogs be completely non-threatening, and then once they hit a year, all of a sudden they have like a very territorial dog. I'm like, yeah, because now they're like kind of like an adult now. So now you're seeing those behaviors, whereas before they were non-threatening because they weren't an adult yet. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, or like a negative experience may happen where like the dog was attacked and the next day they just flip and they just hate all dogs type of thing. That's like common as well, okay? So here, in terms of like how I approach this or like the time and cost and stuff, you have a couple of options here. The way I approach things is I know and see like what you're needing, and then I got an idea of what you're needing as well from you guys. Is you're probably around 6 to 9 classes, okay? Because it's for the most part it's just simple stuff. 2 classes on leash walking to see what does that fix, okay? By the 3rd class, we would most likely start delving into the fence reactivity. Now, I cannot make him like the neighbor's dog. And I've seen dogs that will play with each other out at the park, and then they go on the fences and they're fighting.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
way
and
worse
I think
at home.
he'd be the same.
Yeah.
If he's in
'Cause
a
he's
different
actually
environment,
pretty
he's
good
way
with
better.
dogs.
Yeah, he likes
Like,
dogs.
They'll have it out
In the beginning, yeah.
to start, and then
First
it's
meeting
kinda
is like, but
okay.
then they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bite, it's just like a scuffle or something, and then
Sure.
it's over.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's just so much better when he's not in his own yard or his own home.
Yeah, because that's his territory. So outside your home is public community space. So like imagine like you woke up and then you saw someone you didn't recognize in the yard. Well, what would you think?
Yeah, you'd be scared, yeah.
Yeah, like what are you doing in my yard? Call the police. That's technically territorial behavior,
Yeah.
except we don't address it ourselves. We call a third party. Dogs address it themselves. Okay, but if you go out in a community space and you see someone in someone's yard, unless they look suspicious, you wouldn't think anything of it. It's not your yard. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how dogs do things as well. And I just spoke to someone that was in almost like very similar kind of situation. They're like the dog, oh, it's a family with 2 dogs that fight each other inside the home, but outside they play no problem. And they're like, why is that happening? Like, because inside the home's territory. So now they're vying for territory. But outside, no one claims or owns anything. So it's all community space, so they can coexist and play normally. So that's the primal way of thinking. So it'd be 2 classes on leash walking. What does that fix? A class on stopping, which is general behavior, which is simple, because it's just how do I correct my dog using the tool that I have, okay? So if reactivity, for whatever reason, would still be a problem, it's just that the way that we were planning on approaching it isn't working, so we have direct and indirect. Indirect is, I spank his little hind, and that's just like, you know, a saying, you're not really spanking them, but like with the e-collar, when you're disciplining them for the leash walking stuff, that's the indirect approach to fixing the reactivity. Okay, so we're not correcting him for being reactive, we're actually just putting some structure in his brain, some discipline. What does that fix? Let's say by class 3, we're still struggling on one type of reactivity, maybe reactivity to dogs behind fences as you walk past them. That means he needs to get direct consequence, which means, okay, go ahead and run to the dog and see what happens. And then you correct them for the behavior itself. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But that we determine as we go along. And then by like, which would also cover how you correct them for fence reactivity within the yard. It's the same thing. Just don't do that, right? People coming into the home, it's its own class, because it's teaching you how to communicate with him. Again, using the tool that you have to relax him and settle him, so that people can come in and he's not on edge and he can actually relax. What's gonna take time most likely is his response to their sudden movements, depending on how bad the nervousness is, okay? So if he's really a nervous type of dog, it's gonna be a while, because his brain can't help. When there's an action, it's literally reaction. Jump up the clock, bark, right? So what happens is we create a sequence. And the sequence currently is somebody moves, I bark. Or I hear something, I bark. So then it becomes, I hear something, I bark, consequence. Okay? And then what does he do afterwards? So then it becomes, it's I hear a sound, I bark, consequence, and then he thinks, what happens if I stop barking? Nothing. And we keep repeating that. And eventually, he's going to hear the sound, think about barking, but then not. And he's like, do I get corrected? Oh, no correction happens. Oh, so I can hear something and not bark, not get corrected, but then also nothing bad happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's what takes time. And consistency. Like, you're not going to be 100%. No one's 100%. But the timing is not an issue as long as he's being corrected as he's performing the behavior. Okay, so if you're in the kitchen and he's barking and you walk over there 30 seconds later and you correct him, it doesn't matter as long as he was still barking. Okay, ideally you want to correct him sooner, because if you always correct him 30 seconds in, his brain's going to learn I can bark for 30 seconds before the correction happens.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that leaves, so you'd be like maybe in this, wait, no, because then we have duration. So with people coming over, my idea or my assumption is I think he is going to warm up to people, because he already has been with positive. It's just that nervous trigger that's left, right? So if someone makes progress with positive to a degree, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good progress, it lets me know how far they're going to get along with using aversives, okay? Because in my opinion, aversives are far more effective than positive. Is then you'll have a balance of both. Okay, I'm not against positive reinforcement, I just don't rely on it to change behavior. So it would be a balance of, I correct you and you bark and growl or whatever, but then you're also going to be rewarded for good behavior. Okay, so then he has, it really kind of just clears up the picture of like, oh, okay, cool. If I don't bark at you, nothing happens, but then I also get stuff from you, right? And then we should see a more quicker, what's the word? He opens up quicker to them. We can expand his bubble of people he trusts. Would this guy ever be off leash anywhere?
In our yard or in your brother's yard, but he can get under the fence in his brother's yard, not in our yard. He can't. But one of the things that we know he loves to do is like run free, which he can't do ever because we can't take him out anymore. But and my brother-in-law's yard. It's like this giant yard and the 2 other dogs, and they can like run and have so much fun. Like I would love it if he could do that, but if he gets away from us, he can get under the fence. He's small.
Okay. So one thing you'd do in that scenario is you would call him, right? Or don't call him the fence. Right?
Yeah, because my fear is that there's a kid, so the fence is like open, like you can see through the fence, it's like a wrought iron one, and there's a kid at the next door house, so I always have him on a lead line because I'm terrified that he's gonna break free and like go bite that kid if she comes out. So, but I would love for him to be able to like play and have fun like that without me worrying that he's gonna bite somebody if they come into the picture.
Sure. So what we would do, you have a couple of approaches. One would be you can make a perimeter using the collar that if he got X distance close to the fence, the collar would go off. So he's like, oh crap, I don't want to get 2 feet of the fence or I'll get remoted, right? So then he keeps a natural distance of it. So he doesn't even get the chance to get to it to crawl under it. Or you just leave him be, and then anytime you see the potential trigger, so like let's say that little girl is out and he starts running towards the fence and like bark at her, you would correct that. Don't bark at the girl when she's in the yard. So if you can't even bark at her, very unlikely he's actually gonna get over there and like bite her. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're stopping.
I don't think he would bite. I don't think he would bite a person.
Well, he has
Unless,
people.
like, they went to touch him. Like, I don't think,
Well, he runs up
I
to a
don't
little
think
kid,
he
the
would
little kid's gonna go
aggressively,
touch
like,
him.
actually, like, pursue someone. He would stand there and bark at him like crazy.
Well, he bit a lady that I was walking next to because she like kind of
Yeah,
was like, oh,
that's
cute
what
puppy.
happens. He's
Bit
so
him,
cute
bit her.
that, like, people are like, oh, hi, puppy. And he's like,
I mean, now he barks so aggressively though that they can't get close to him really, or he charges at him. But I don't know. Yeah, I think he would bite a kid. But
Sure, I mean, there's a lot of variables in play. So for instance, with that lady, if he's already on edge,
which he was, yeah.
oh my God, look at this cute puppy, right? They're adding energy into the situation. He's like, what's the matter with you? Why are you talking like that, right? And plus they're in his personal space. Like, get away from me.
That was the first bite. That's when I stopped walking him because that was like, he was pulling, but he had never bitten before, and then he suddenly bit her. I was like, oh my God, like what just happened?
Was that a contact one or was that like a just?
She had a glove on, so he didn't puncture or anything, but it was enough that she was like, oh my God, like she like ripped her hand back. So
Sure.
I mean, that was the extent of it. That was the first one.
Sure. Yeah. For me, like I get it. You know, because like.
Oh, he bit the kid in Mia's yard too. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. Yeah. What happened there?
It was a little kid, probably like 5 years old. He was running through the yard and up to the house, and he went and attacked him and bit his leg.
yeah, he will give chase. So like, if someone runs, he will chase them down. I just think that like, if you stood your ground with him and just stood right in front of him without making any move towards him.
Well,
like,
your uncle did that.
No, he went to pet him. He went to pet. He was like, it's okay, and he got bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Same. Yeah. It's all the same stuff. All that stuff makes sense to me. You know, so like even if the kid was moving, nervous dog triggers because of fast movement.
Fast movement, yeah.
Right, and plus it's moving away, so it triggers predatory or prey drive. Or it also just shows weakness. Oh, you're running from me. So that boosts confidence to really get it right there.
Okay.
So like all that stuff makes sense to me. So,
He's super agile and likes to show it off as much as he can.
But that's like, I want to give him opportunities
He's, like,
to like
crazy
enjoy
fast
himself, you know?
yeah, the issue would be, so like, because the next thing we want to cover is recall, just come and call, so that he could enjoy off-leash freedom and you wouldn't have to worry about what happens, right?
Yeah.
You have a means of stopping him from doing something, at the same time you have a means of getting it in return.
Right.
Is like, let's say you're out somewhere and he's, you know, off the leash and someone just invites themselves into your space, like, oh my God, look at this cute dog off leash, right? And they're assuming like he must be friendly and they come into your personal space and they go to touch him. That problem most likely is still gonna be there, but they're coming into your space.
Yeah.
You see how like that's how he's gonna view that. So then he's gonna be like, hey, what are you doing in our space? I'm gonna correct you. He doesn't think like, oh, we're at Halls Park and we share the space with all these other people. Does that make sense? That's not how you use the world. So when it comes to like random people petting them, I wouldn't worry about that. It makes things too complicated. Okay. Now, if someone were to like coo at him and talk to him and stuff like that, we shouldn't get a response because again, he's going to be 0-1. But if they come in to actually make contact with him and or make contact with him, there may be something there. Okay. Because right now when I tried to pet him, he didn't give me anything. And that's actually, so like, we know he can, but the problem is, it would take work to pull it out, and that's what makes it difficult to work with. When I tell people, when I get dogs where it's just blatant, and it's like the dog just attacks for the sake of attacking, I'm like, that's easy to work with, because it's right there. But when it's something that has to be kind of fished out, makes it more complicated.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it definitely doesn't have to get fished out if our neighbors are in visible space of where he's at in our yard. Like then it's like full on, like as ferocious as he can be. Whether it's the people neighbors or the dog neighbors, he hates the neighbors.
Sure. But all that stuff can be corrected. And it's simply, again, like, I don't care what you do, but just don't bark at everybody.
Yeah.
Okay? All the hesitation and the resistance stuff that you're seeing too, we can overcome as well. Because e-collar can make a dog move forward when they don't want to move forward. So what we end up seeing in the beginning is probably a lot of this here, a lot of this shaking, a lot of salivating, a lot of panting. Because the e-collar is a stressor, it's going to put him under stress. But eventually, the more you expose him, it'll get him over it. But that's also how we build confidence. We don't learn how to handle problems by not handling problems. Right? At some point, he's got to learn how to handle life and walk past people and not be reactive. But in the beginning, you're going to see his stress levels go up because we're taking away a response. We're saying you cannot be reactive anymore. So if he can't be reactive, all he has is deal with it. So the stress has to go somewhere. You're going to see a lot of shaking, panting, probably really big bulgy eyes because of that. But that's just part of the process. Okay. So I think, so with 6 classes, I put 2 on heel, 1 on behavior, 1 on fence, 2 on recall. A 9, which is give us a little bit more of a window to work on stuff if needed, and we can also do stationary control. So like if you want to go to a restaurant and have him there, you can just have him lay down, he won't move for a few hours. The only thing is, of course, because he is a cute dog, you're exposing yourself to those potential situations where someone's going to quit him and want to pet him. Now, I have a very high standard for my dogs. I expect them to behave and not be reactive. But at the same time, I advocate for them. And I have no problem being blunt or rude to people to tell them to back off and not touch my dog. And I think that's where some people struggle. You know, especially when you got a small guy like this. But, oh, I'm good with dogs.
Yeah.
Until you get bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I get it, my client get it all the time. I have a client that just started the first class. And at the end, she's like, oh, one last thing, our neighbor really loves petting our dog and we don't like it. And I'm like, you ever tell him no? And she's like, no, we felt bad. I'm like, don't feel bad. Because now you're the one that's uncomfortable.
Right.
Right? So you have to be uncomfortable so that your neighbor can touch your dog. That makes no sense to me.
Right.
Right? So then they're, you know, my job is to empower people and tell them like, it's okay to tell people no and all that stuff. But then you have to be ready because you're going to meet some people that don't get it.
Yeah.
You know?
Kids.
Well, kids, yeah. I mean, I honestly will tell anyone now not to touch him because I'm terrified he's going to bite.
Mhm.
I'm terrified he's going to bite a kid. That's my biggest fear, but even anyone. I don't want him biting anyone, but yeah.
When it comes to socializing them, so like I wouldn't worry about random people, but and when it comes to like building his trust of people or like socializing them, I do have an exercise. So like if you're trying to get him to like warm up the kids or something, or like kids in the family, friends, kids, whatever, I do have a very structured exercise that I do. And it's easy to do. It's just a matter of repetition. Because if you do it once a month, like maybe you'll like them, but it's going to take a really long time. But if you see kids like twice a week, it's going to make really good progress.
Right.
Now, if it's not there, it's not there. I can't make him like something. That's his decision, just like with people, right? Like no one can make you like something. You have to decide, like, sure, I'll give tomatoes a try.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't like them. You know?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing for dogs. So we definitely have things that we can do to try to incentivize them, but ultimately if it's not there, it's just like, well, I just expect them to behave himself, not try to chase them, bark at them, snap at them, and just like coexist.
That's
Okay.
it. I mean, if he could coexist, that would be a dream right now because he can't.
Yeah.
One bizarre story was that he got out of, we accidentally left our gate open and he got out. And I used to be able to just let him out into the yard and I'd go back 10 minutes later and get him. And I went back 10 minutes later, realized the gate was open. I was like, oh my God, he's been out there for 10 minutes. So we like go to search and find him. Our phone numbers are on his tag. A lady found him in the alley and he let her pick him up and take her home. The kids were petting him and everything. We were like, oh my God, don't touch him. Like we'll be right there. But he was really good for them. So that was weird too. So I don't know why that was.
Because technically you're territory. So the behavior is with you.
Okay.
Okay, so because he was out of his element and not on territory, he was in community public space, there was no threat there.
Okay.
Okay, but when he's with you, so when you're walking on the street, you're your own space, right? So like if somebody you don't know came to that space, how would you feel?
Yeah.
Uncomfortable, right? Because they're within your personal space territory. Same thing here. So he's just an expansion of your personal space. So if you're not there, there's nothing to protect because you empowered him. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Other questions?
So with this training plan we're talking about, would that cover seeing the human neighbors in their
Yep.
yards too, and
Yep.
we can correct that and not
Yep.
get them,
Because
okay?
it's all the same stuff.
Yeah, okay.
It's barking, no matter what's behind it. Don't bark at anybody behind these fences,
Okay.
okay?
And then the other thing that is pretty annoying is that we've kind of almost had to gate him to the back of the house now because we have a big picture window in our living room and he can get up on the couch and he just like barks like crazy
Yep.
and lunges at the window and everything at squirrels or people or whatever. And with this training program, could we help get that behavior
Yep.
solved for too?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying earlier, I was like, to you it seems like 10 different things, but it's all the same thing.
Okay.
Barking at something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just where he's doing it is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he could be in the living room, hear a sound, he barks at the sound. He barks what he sees through the window. He barks at what he sees in the yard. But the behavior is the same, it's just what's in response to is different. So it's the same thing here, just correct all that stuff.
Okay.
You correct what you don't want. Okay, obedience comes into play for control, like, hey, you're too far, get over here, right? Or walk in a leash so that he walks well, we're not getting frustration, he doesn't become reactive. But having him, like telling him to heel while he's barking at the neighbors, that has no, there we go. that has no, how do you say, place within the context. Because having him heel in the yard wouldn't actually happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, hey, you have to exist in the yard and not lunge and bark. Okay? Other questions?
Do you have other questions? I guess my only last question, so the way our family is set up, Mike has a daughter and Mambo will go back and forth from houses with her, he always has. But we were like, should we just keep him for the duration of this training and just work with him and, you know what I mean, not have him go back and forth, because it'll be hard to train them on what to do as well. So, like, do you think that's a problem, like him going back and forth and getting his environment changed all the time?
Is that gonna happen in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm divorced, so like when he kind of travels with my daughter, so
We
it's
probably
like
have
every
him more
other
now,
weekend,
but yeah, like,
Wednesday.
So
So he goes back and forth, but like
it
we
would-
can like keep him if it's better if he just stays in one house while we work with him.
I would just live your life as you would live it normally. Because let's say we kept it in one space and then you finish your program and then you do that and then we get problems, now you're done with the program.
okay,
You want to do this stuff when I'm here, and the verses make things so much easier.
okay,
Okay, and it's really the same stuff, whether he's barking at your home or whatever the environment is. Like, you're not going to do that anymore. Okay, it's the So your daughter, is that correct? How old is she?
14.
14. She handles them.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that it's not going to affect you. Okay, to a degree where if you're doing the training and reinforcing it, but she's not, he's going to be a jerk with her.
that's the problem, and a 14-year-old kid you can only get him to do so much, you know what I mean?
Correct.
Like, she's just not paying attention the same way we are, or like,
Exactly.
you know?
The
so-
other thing is how they feel about it. Like, oh my God, you're shocking them? Like, no,
Yeah.
no, we're not shocking them. Like, trying to explain that stuff. Like, so what I would expect is if she's taking care of him, he's gonna have those behaviors because she's not reinforcing anything, okay?
Yeah.
But it's not gonna affect you because he's gonna learn, oh, when I'm with you guys, I have to behave. There is no being reactive or whatever. But with her, I can get away with it. So it's kind of like kids. So me growing up, my grandma would spoil me because I was the firstborn. So I knew when I was with grandma, I could get away with stuff. And then when I was with my mom and my grandma, she would override my mom. My mom would try to correct me for something. She'd say, no, leave him alone. He's just a kid. So then I learned when I was with mom and grandma, I could get away with stuff because grandma was gonna stand up for me, right? The same thing here. So when he's with her, it's kind of like grandma, he's gonna get away with stuff. Now, if he's with her and you guys, and you try to correct him, and she's like, hey, no. And she's like, please don't do that, whatever. And you actually respond and stop correcting him and don't fulfill or follow through 100%. He goes, oh. So when I'm with her and you guys, you won't follow through. Does that make sense? So as long as you're consistent, he'll be consistent with you. What she does with him isn't going to be detrimental to the training. His behavior is just going to shift according to who he's with.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
And the last question, I think, I keep saying that, but so clearly he's stressed out right now. And you did say that there's going to be that like phase of that until he gets to the other side. Will he be a more confident and happy guy? Like that's what we want for him too, is like a better life that he has right now, because it sucks and it keeps getting smaller and smaller because of the behavior. So at the end of this, like, should he have a little bit more confidence and be happier and those things, like he won't be like freaking out like this?
So what happens is when you put him under controlled stressor, is that he learns how to handle stress. So he's not like this, okay? But dogs aren't happy like humans are happy. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
It's more so like just content.
Yeah, or that, right?
Yeah,
just
that's just
not
like I'm not,
Yeah.
like he was.
Like can sit in a room without being
Like when he is at home and there's no stress, he's like super happy or whatever, content, and he has fun, and you know, so like that's like if we can get that for him, like in most situations, like that would be great. But
so I would simplify it and just make it where he'll just behave himself. Okay, because if you type too much stuff on how he feels about things, it's gonna impact you. Okay. What I would expect is a lot of this. Okay. I don't know how long it's gonna take before he gets over it. Every case is different. It might not even happen during training. Okay, it'll happen post training. But what happens is when you get more control, more control equals more freedom. Okay, so I'm a positive punishment trainer, because positive means add, it doesn't mean good. So positive reinforcement adds something good, positive punishment adds something bad. So I'm like a positive punishment trainer because I use an e-collar in the beginning, because it's the simplest way to get effective training that the owner can do with very little effort. Okay, so in the beginning, because it's discipline, the dogs are usually under stress in the very first half. But once we start doing recall, people tend to take their dogs out more, because one, they can, because they can actually walk their dog, but also they have a means of getting their dog back. Then now they do more stuff, and that's where the positive reinforcement side of it starts to balance things out.
Yeah.
Because he's doing more stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but in the beginning, expect it to be kind of rough. Okay. But when you start to go like, oh wow, we can actually take him to a restaurant. We can actually take him to our friend's house, and we can go to the park and have him in the yard and not be barking. You start doing more. So then he starts to open up more, because it's like, oh, like cool, I can be in these situations and not be a jackass.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's when you'll start to see kind of what you're saying, just it's not what you're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like at least his freedoms will be opened up more, because that's what I mean, right now it's just like we just have to keep like closing in on like where he can be and what he can do.
It's
and
super
see
common.
and like,
And it creates more problems.
Yeah.
Because then if you try to confront the problems while you're using something like positive reinforcement, which has a very low ceiling, now you're just constantly going to situations without any means of making progress.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
so
we're not making progress right now at all.
Yeah, so I've seen this way worse. Okay, I mean, he's what, 8 to 11 pounds?
He's like 7 or 8, yeah.
Yeah, 7, 8 pounds, yeah, so he's a little guy. So the big issue that or the biggest issue that we get here is just collars for guys like this can be kind of inconsistent, because his neck's so small.
Yeah.
Okay, so they do make a collar that's
I bought like the smallest one they had, and it's still like
pretty
There's
big.
like a big logo thing on him, yeah.
Yeah.
the box is probably like that big.
So the one they make for them is like a third of that. Okay, so
Oh,
it's
that's
much
good.
smaller.
Yeah. This thing kind of weighs them down, so yeah, okay, good.
And then there's an adapter that you can purchase, because what happens is, because their neck is so skinny with the 2 probes, sometimes the probes will fall on the outside of the neck.
Oh.
So there's no contact, because it has to make contact like this.
Okay.
So if they tend to fall down like this, and if his neck's right between the probes, we don't get anything. So there's an adapter. I have 2 other dogs that are a little bit bigger than him right now. They're like maybe 13-ish pounds. So it's easier because their neck's a little bit thicker, but there's a special adapter that we can pick up, or have you pick up to give you consistent contact, so you're not having to worry about constantly just in the collar.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, you're like in the 6 to 9 week range. 6 would be like the bare bones, and then 9 week gives us a little bit more wiggle room to like do socialization exercises, do some stationary control. So like if you want to take them somewhere, like a restaurant or something, have them just like laying there, not moving or not, all over the place. You can do that as well. Okay, but definitely around 6 to get all this, what you're needing stuff down.
Okay, all right.
Questions?
One more is, once we get through this and we can get him in a better spot, do you think he can make the improvement to the level that we would be able to take him to, like, if we wanted to travel and take him to a kennel to like stay for a week, or or is that like beyond?
Depends on the kennel.
Okay.
I mean,
Or even a doggy daycare one day or something, like stuff like that. Like, would he be able to handle stuff like that? Like, can you get him to that point?
One, if it's there. Okay, because if he's just indifferent to dogs, he's just indifferent to dogs. Aside from like the one that he met as a puppy or whatever, and then the other one that he's kind of gradually coming over, kennels are a variable because they tend to be like right. Today's not a busy day. It's like get like 13, 15 dogs, but we could have 30, 40 dogs back there, and it would be just as quiet. Whereas you go to another. Have you ever been to dog daycare before?
No.
No. You walk in, you can just hear dogs barking all over the place. It's super stressful. So mine is really structured because of that reason, because just being in the environment itself can be stressful for the dog. So if you sent him there and he's not having a good time, like I would say like, yeah, probably because it's just crazy there, it's hectic and stuff like that. He'd be more than welcome to come here if you ever wanted to bring him here. We could try him out and we would tell you like, hey, like, he showed some interest, but kind of didn't care, And I've had dogs come here. We had 2 or 3 dogs that we had trained, and we're actually social at other daycares, like completely social. But when they came here, because we're regulated and we have rules and stuff, it took them a while before they opened up because they didn't know what they could do or not do. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they were more cautious. And literally, they came like 20 times before they started to finally open up and play. So we don't know how it's going to pan out. But that's another option. And then we do treadmill, we do duration work, we reinforce the training. So anything that you've done with him, we do as well. We have other dogs that have similar issues. I have one that's coming on Friday to board with us. We've never boarded him or anything here. He just had his second class, and the dog's crazy. Like on 3 types of drugs, tried to attack me several times during the first training session, all that stuff, and he's coming to board here because we have the means of handling something like that.
Right.
So pretty confident
Okay.
we can handle a guy like him.
Okay.
But yeah, I wouldn't worry about it so much as like for him, because it's more so it just makes the person feel better.
Yeah.
Like dogs don't, he doesn't sit there going like, man, I wish I could go to daycare.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm thinking of scenarios like once like we actually start going back to work and stuff like that. Like our cleaning lady comes on Tuesdays, I don't want him to bite her, so like I don't know what to do about that. Like so if we have him, like we get him out of the house for that day and stuff like that. I'm just trying to think of like different scenarios. Like
yeah, and that makes sense because like with the cleaning lady, it happens when you're gone, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, well it would. Like we're
It
home
would,
now.
yeah.
We actually lock him up when she comes and put him in this like studio that we have that he can't hear anything because I don't know what else to do. Like I'm just trying to like.
That would be another thing, right? So don't bark at the cleaning lady.
Yeah.
Well,
don't attack the cleaning lady.
Yeah, don't attack her.
Yeah.
But like if he's alone by himself and she comes in, that's a different scenario.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else?
No. I don't think so.
So Maria will send you the information for the 6 to 9 classes, and then she will send you the collar that you'll need to pick up as well.
Okay.
You can grab it on Amazon. And then in terms of like scheduling and stuff, she'll handle all that. We've had a large number of like training requests and consultations come through and continue to come through. So how soon you can start just depends on your availability and all that.
Okay.
But I don't comment on my calendar anymore because it could be one thing one day and another thing another day.
Yeah.
Would we come here for training?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do in-home, but it's more expensive because all my clients travel to me now. We are going to start transferring from here to Oz Park at some point. Because that's where with COVID, that's when we started training. We just started doing all our training at Oz Park, which is super busy. We're just still here just because weather, Chicago, it snowed, a few days ago,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody keeps asking us, when are you going back to Oz? We're waiting for consistency on Chicago weather because I don't want to plan to be over there and then something happened and like reschedule and come back here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, depending on when you start, I might already be at Oz Park, or maybe mid-program, I'm going, hey, we're transferring to Oz Park now, and then we would just be over there instead.
Okay.
Okay? Anything else?
No, do you have anything? No?
Alright. So I'll give you the little terror back,
Okay.
and then you can just remove that.
Come here, bud.
And did you happen to watch any of our videos?
Yes, I'm starting to watch them the other day, actually.
Okay.
On Instagram, those ones.
Those ones, and we also have a YouTube channel, so if
Okay.
you want to see how a training session looks like.
He's in here.
We should walk them, maybe probably some pee.
If you want to get a feel of like how the e-collar works and everything, you just go to our YouTube channel, and then we do them by lesson. Lesson ones are always good to watch because no one knows what they're doing but me. And it's all verbal instruction now, so you can just see how the exercise works and everything. The ones that I have right now that are smaller dogs are Goose and Pretzel. The first class or two are just kind of wonky with them because they didn't have the adapter for their collar, so there was no consistency. And then once we got the adapter, it was much more consistent.
Okay.
You know, but those are two small dogs. They're about the 13 pounders I was talking about.
Yeah.
That are on remote collar, just
Okay.
to give you a feel for.
Okay.
You know, you can use them on small dogs. I've used them on small, as small of a dog as 4 pounds. It's just really hard to get consistency because they're so tiny.
Mhm.